Welcome to the Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas, your AI research lead, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
And I'm Aiva. Together, we keep you sharp, informed, and ahead of the curve.
Let's get into it. All right, so imagine your doctor telling you that an AI model just got 20 times faster at solving complex robotics problems than the best human team from last year. That's not hypothetical. That happened this week. Welcome to Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva. It's Friday, June 19th, 2026, and we've got some genuinely wild stuff to unpack today. We're talking about OpenAI making massive leaps in health advice accuracy, Anthropic teaching Claude to program robotic dogs, and honestly, the collaboration features that just dropped might change how we think about AI workflows entirely.
Yeah, and before we dive in, I just want to say this week has felt different. Like, we're not talking about incremental improvements anymore. We're talking about AI systems that are matching frontier reasoning models in specialized domains and doing it fast enough for everyday use.
And that's actually where I want to start, because OpenAI just announced something that's going to directly affect hundreds of millions of people, whether they realize it or not.
Right, so GPT 5.5 Instant, which, reminder, is the faster, more accessible version of their GPT 5.5 model, is now performing on par with their frontier thinking models specifically for health-related questions. And this isn't just available to pro users or researchers. This is rolling out to all free users in ChatGPT.
Which is huge, right? Because OpenAI is saying that more than 230 million people every week are turning to ChatGPT with health and wellness questions. That's not a small pilot program. That's a massive real-world deployment of medical-adjacent AI.
And the specific improvements they're highlighting are really telling. They're saying GPT 5.5 Instant is better at recognizing when urgent care may be needed, asking for relevant context, explaining uncertainty, and making complex information easier to understand. Those are the exact failure modes that made people nervous about health AI in the first place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that they're being specific about what improved, because better at health questions could mean anything. But recognizing when urgent care is needed, that's a safety-critical feature. That's the difference between someone getting helpful information and someone dangerously delaying medical treatment.
Oh, absolutely. And here's what I think is fascinating about this announcement. They explicitly called out that physician-led evaluation was critical to making these intelligence gains. So they're not just throwing more compute at the problem, they're actually working with medical professionals to shape how the model responds.
Which, honestly, is how it should work. Like, you don't want engineers alone deciding what constitutes good medical advice. You want actual physicians in the loop saying, hey, when someone describes these symptoms, the model needs to be more cautious. Or this explanation is technically correct, but would confuse a patient.
Right, and think about the architecture shift here. They've somehow gotten a fast, instant response model to perform as well as their slower, more deliberate thinking models, but specifically in this domain. That suggests they've done some really sophisticated fine-tuning or distillation work.
Okay, so help me understand the implications here. If GPT 5.5 Instant is matching the thinking models on health questions, does that mean we're going to see this pattern repeat in other specialized domains? Like, could we see legal optimized instant models or engineering-focused ones?
I think that's exactly where this is headed. It's like, imagine you have this incredibly powerful but slow reasoning system, and then you figure out how to capture its expertise in specific domains and compress it into something that responds in real time. You're essentially creating specialized expert systems, but with the flexibility of a general-purpose language model.
And the fact that this is available to free users is not something to gloss over. That's a deliberate choice to prioritize access over monetization for health information, which, has some interesting ethical dimensions.
Yeah, for sure. Though I imagine the thinking is that health information is somewhat, there's a public good argument there. Like, you don't want someone to not get potentially life-saving advice because they can't afford a subscription.
Agreed. Though I do wonder about the liability questions. If 230 million people a week are asking health questions, and the model is actively trying to identify when urgent care is needed, at what point does this start to look like practicing medicine?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think that's why they're being so careful about framing this as making information easier to understand and explaining uncertainty. They're not diagnosing. They're helping people understand when they should seek professional help.
Right, which is actually a really valuable role. It's like triage, but for whether you should even go to triage.
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of frontier models doing impressive things, we need to talk about Project Fetch, because this is one of the coolest real-world AI evaluations I've seen in a while.
Oh, the RoboDoc thing. Yes, this is Anthropic's Frontier Red Team, and they're basically stress testing Claude's capabilities in increasingly complex real-world scenarios.
So this is phase 2 of Project Fetch, where they're testing how well Claude can program a robotic dog. And the headline result is just absurd.
Opus 4.7, working on its own, was approximately 20 times faster than last year's best human team that was aided by Opus 4.1.
Wait, hold on. 20 times faster? That's not like a marginal improvement. That's a completely different category of performance.
It's wild, right? And this is comparing autonomous Opus 4.7 against human experts who had access to Opus 4.1 as a tool. So we're not just seeing AI improvement, we're seeing AI autonomy surpassing human-AI collaboration from a year ago.
Okay, but I have to ask, did the RoboDog actually successfully fetch the beach ball? Because that seems like the actual goal here.
Oh, it definitely failed. They explicitly say the RoboDog, alas, still failed to fetch a beach ball, which is kind of perfect, honestly. It's a great reminder that speed of programming doesn't automatically equal success at the task.
Right, this is measuring how quickly Claude can write and iterate on robotics code, not whether it can solve the full problem, which is still impressive, but it's a different thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this gets at something really interesting about AI capabilities right now. We're at this point where the models are incredibly fast at generating plausible solutions, iterating on code, debugging all the mechanical parts of programming. But the actual problem solving, the understanding of physical constraints, the intuition about what might work, that's still hard.
Which makes sense when you think about it. Claude doesn't have embodied experience with physics. It doesn't have intuition about how a robotic dog moves through space, how much force is needed, how to compensate for momentum. It's working from training data and text descriptions.
Although, I bet the code it was generating was getting progressively more sophisticated. Like, if it's iterating 20 times faster, it can try a lot more approaches in the same amount of time. It's just that the solution space is really hard.
Right. And this is why I love that Anthropic is doing these real-world red team evaluations. Because it's easy to benchmark language models on text tasks, but when you put them in contact with physical reality, you learn where the actual gaps are.
For sure. And the fact that they're publicizing this, including the failure, is actually really valuable for calibrating expectations. Like, yes, Claude got massively faster at robotics programming. No, that doesn't mean we're about to have autonomous robotic dogs everywhere.
Okay, but I am curious about the methodology here. When they say Opus 4.7 was 20 times faster, are they measuring wall clock time, number of iterations, lines of code generated?
That's a good question. Based on how these things are usually measured, I'd guess it's probably about time to reach a certain milestone or level of functionality. But you're right that the specific metric matters a lot for interpreting the result.
Yeah, because if it's just generating code faster, but not necessarily better code, that's different than if it's actually solving subproblems more efficiently.
True, though given that this is a red team evaluation, I imagine they're being pretty rigorous about what counts as progress. These aren't people trying to hype up the model, they're specifically trying to find its limits.
Fair point. And the fact that they're on phase 2 suggests they learned a lot from phase 1 and are systematically increasing the difficulty.
Exactly. All right, so let's shift gears to something that's going to be immediately useful for a lot of people listening. Anthropic just announced that Claude Design and Claude Code now work together in both directions, and this is rolling out today.
Okay, this is genuinely exciting because it's addressing one of the big friction points in AI-assisted workflows. You can now hand a design off to build or start in Claude Code and sync design projects from your terminal.
Right. So imagine you're working on a web app. You start in Claude Design, you mock up your interface, get the visual design exactly how you want it, and then you can hand that directly to Claude Code to implement. No manual translation, no trying to describe your design in text prompts.
Or you go the other direction. You're deep in your terminal, you've built a bunch of functionality, and you realize you need to create some visual assets or polish the UI. You can sync that into Claude Design without leaving your development environment.
And they've also added export options. You can export to PDF and PowerPoint or send your work to other tools you're already using. So this isn't just about staying in the Claude ecosystem. They're actually building bridges to existing workflows.
Which is smart, right? Because the reality is that most people aren't going to abandon all their existing tools. They're going to want AI that fits into what they're already doing.
Absolutely. And the bidirectional aspect is key. A lot of AI tools are one way. You prompt, you get output, done. But if design and code can actually hand work back and forth and maintain context, that's much closer to how humans actually collaborate.
And it makes me wonder about the technical implementation. Like, they must have some shared representation of project state that both interfaces can read and modify. That's non-trivial.
Yeah, especially when you consider that design and code are pretty different domains. You've got visual layouts, typography, color schemes on one side, and then component structures, state management, business logic on the other. Keeping those in sync is complicated.
Right. Like, if you change a button color in design, does that automatically update the code? What if you've manually overridden that style in the code? How do conflicts get resolved?
Those are exactly the questions I'd want to test, though the fact that they're launching this suggests they figured out at least a reasonable approach. And honestly, even if it's not perfect, having any kind of integration is better than completely separate workflows.
Agreed. And the other detail that caught my eye is that artifacts draw on the full context of your session. Codebase, plugins, skills, connected tools, they're private until you share them, and sharing stays inside your organization.
The privacy angle is important, especially for enterprise use. Like if you're building something proprietary, you don't want it leaking outside your organization, even accidentally.
Yeah, and the fact that artifacts pull from your full session context means they should be a lot more relevant and useful. It's not just generating generic code, it's generating code that understands your specific project structure, your dependencies, your existing patterns.
Which gets back to that collaboration idea. It's less like using a tool and more like working with a colleague who has context on what you're building.
Although I will say, and this is me being cautious, not skeptical, I'd want to understand the privacy model more deeply. Like, what exactly counts as inside your organization? How is that boundary enforced? What happens if someone leaves the organization?
Those are totally fair questions, and honestly, questions that enterprise customers are definitely asking. The good news is that Anthropic has generally been pretty good about documentation and transparency on that stuff.
Right. Okay, so this is all rolling out today for paid plans on web and desktop. Have you had a chance to try it yet?
I haven't personally tested it yet, no, but I'm really curious to see how smooth the handoffs are in practice. Like the demo looks great, but demos always look great.
True. Though early user reports should start coming in pretty quickly. If there are rough edges, we'll hear about it.
For sure. All right, let's talk about Gemini Live, because Google is doing something interesting with their community engagement here.
Yeah, so Gemini Live is getting some new features, and they're demoing them at a Discord community event. The event is actually happening this Thursday. Oh wait, that was yesterday by the time people are listening to this.
Right, June 18th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. But the features themselves are what's interesting. They're highlighting that Gemini Live lets you keep conversations going, connect to your favorite tools mid-conversation, and show Gemini what you're seeing to seamlessly generate new images.
Okay, so the keep conversations going part is basically persistence, right? Your conversation doesn't just end when you close the app. You can come back to it, reference earlier parts, build on previous work.
Exactly, which sounds basic, but it's actually a big deal for complex tasks. Like if you're planning a trip or working through a research project, you don't want to start from scratch every time.
And connecting to tools mid-conversation is huge. That's the difference between Gemini being a chatbot and being an actual assistant. Like you could be talking about your schedule and then boom, it connects to your calendar and actually makes changes.
Yeah, and the image generation piece is interesting too. Show Gemini what you're seeing to seamlessly generate new images. So that sounds like you could take a photo of something and say, make me a version of this but in a different style, or create variations on this design.
Which is combining vision and generation in a pretty fluid way. You're not in an image model mode versus a chat mode. It's all one continuous conversation.
Right. And I think that's the broader trend we're seeing across all these announcements. The boundaries between different AI capabilities are getting blurrier. It's less about this tool does text, this tool does code, this tool does images, and more about models that can fluidly move between modalities based on what you need.
Yeah, and doing it in a Discord community event is a smart move for Google. It's less formal than a big press announcement, but it lets them show off features to engaged users and get immediate feedback.
For sure. And it positions Gemini as having this community around it, which is valuable for building loyalty and getting people invested in the ecosystem.
Okay, I want to loop back to something OpenAI posted because it connects to the health stuff we talked about earlier. They put out a statement about how improving human health will be one of the most personal, tangible impacts of AGI.
Yeah, and this feels like framing, right? Like they're making a case for why all this AI development matters beyond just making cool technology.
Right. They're saying, as our models continue to improve, our goal is to make ChatGPT more accurate, more useful, and more impactful in those moments, and to keep bringing that progress to more people.
And I think there's something genuine there. Like, yes, it's also good messaging, but health is one of those areas where AI could really make a difference for people who don't have easy access to medical information or who are intimidated by the healthcare system.
Absolutely. Though I think the key is in that phrase, more accurate, because the history of medical AI is littered with systems that were confident and wrong, which is obviously dangerous.
For sure. And that's why the emphasis on explaining uncertainty and asking for context is so important. The model needs to know what it doesn't know.
Right. And it needs to communicate that to users in a way that doesn't just sound like hedging, but actually helps people make informed decisions.
Yeah, there's a balance there. You don't want to be so cautious that people ignore the advice, but you also can't overstate your confidence. It's tricky.
And the other thing they mentioned that I found interesting is this idea of beneficial behavior training. They posted about how a small amount of targeted training data produced broad gains beyond the specific training scenarios.
Oh yeah, this is cool. So they compared a model that got this beneficial behavior training against a compute-matched baseline, and the trained model improved on 44 of 53 independent evaluations, spanning deception, reward hacking, safety, health, and mental health.
And these evaluations varied widely in domain, task format, and grading scheme, so it's not like they overfitted to one specific benchmark.
Right, which suggests they found a way to instill more generalizable beneficial behavior, not just teaching the model to pass specific tests.
And what I find fascinating is that this was a small amount of data. They're not saying they dumped millions of examples into this thing. They're saying targeted, thoughtful training data produced broad improvements.
Which is actually more like how human learning works, right? You don't need to experience every possible scenario. You internalize principles and then apply them to new situations.
Exactly. And the cross-domain transfer piece is particularly interesting. They mentioned that when beneficial behavior training was limited to health conversations, the model still improved on non-health evaluations of misalignment and deception.
So teaching it to be more helpful and honest in medical contexts made it more helpful and honest generally. That's a really positive sign for alignment work.
Yeah, it suggests that alignment properties can generalize, which is, that's basically what we need for this to work at scale.
For sure, because you can't manually train for every possible scenario. You need the model to develop something like values or principles that it applies broadly.
Right, though I imagine there are limits to how far that generalization extends. Like, it probably works well for related domains, but might break down for sufficiently novel situations.
Yeah, that's fair. Though I guess the test is whether it generalizes to situations that weren't in the training data at all, which seems to be what they're showing here.
And I appreciate that they're being transparent about this work, like publishing the methodology, the evaluation results, the fact that it worked on 44 of 53 evals. That's the kind of detail that lets other researchers build on this.
Absolutely. Okay, let's hit some quick hits before we wrap up, because there's some interesting stuff that didn't quite make the headlines, but is worth knowing about.
Sounds good. What have you got?
All right, first one is from Google DeepMind, and it's a bit of a warning shot. They're saying there's a narrow window to embed structural security protocols before multi-agent systems scale globally, and they believe this multi-layered approach to agent security should be a collaborative priority.
Okay, so this is basically saying we're approaching a point where multiple AI agents will be interacting autonomously, and we need to build in security measures now, before that becomes widespread.
Exactly. And the narrow window language suggests they think this is coming soon, not something we can kick down the road.
Which makes sense. Once you have millions of autonomous agents operating, it's much harder to retrofit security than to build it in from the start.
Yeah, and the call for collaboration is important too. This isn't something one company can solve alone. If Google has secure agents but everyone else doesn't, that doesn't really help.
Right, though getting everyone to agree on security standards that's going to be challenging.
Oh, for sure. But at least they're raising the issue now rather than after something goes wrong.
Fair. What else?
So this one ties back to the OpenAI training work we mentioned. They noted that the most interesting test was cross-domain transfer. When beneficial behavior training was limited to health conversations, the model still improved on non-health evaluations of misalignment and deception.
Right, which we talked about, but it's worth emphasizing because it's counterintuitive. You'd expect domain-specific training to produce domain-specific improvements.
Exactly. But instead, it seems like training the model to be more careful and honest in one high-stakes domain made it more careful and honest generally.
Which is actually how you'd want it to work. Like, the goal isn't to create a model that's safe only in medical contexts. You want one that's reliably aligned across the board.
Right. And this suggests that's actually achievable, which is encouraging.
Okay, and last thing, back to the Claude announcements. They mentioned that artifacts pull context from your codebase, plugins, skills, and connected tools, and that sharing stays inside your organization.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth reiterating because it's a key differentiator for enterprise use.
Absolutely. Privacy and data governance are make or break issues for a lot of companies. If you can't guarantee that sensitive code or designs stay internal, you can't use the tool.
And the fact that artifacts are private until explicitly shared means you don't have to worry about accidentally exposing something.
Right, which should make security teams a lot more comfortable with people using these tools in their workflow.
For sure. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap up. This has been a really interesting week.
Yeah, I'm particularly struck by how much the focus is shifting toward real-world application and safety. Like, we're not just talking about benchmark scores anymore. We're talking about how these models behave in healthcare contexts, how they handle security in multi-agent systems, how they integrate into actual workflows.
Totally. And I think that's a sign of maturity in the field. The technology is getting to the point where the interesting questions aren't can we build this, but how do we deploy this responsibly and usefully?
Yeah. though we're clearly still figuring out a lot of that. The robo-dog not fetching the beach ball is a good reminder that there's still plenty of hard problems to solve.
Oh, absolutely. But the pace of progress is wild. 20 times faster than last year's best human team? That's just absurd.
It is, and I think we're going to see that acceleration continue, especially as these models get better at collaborating with each other and with humans.
For sure. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Semper AI Digest. If you found this valuable, please share it with someone who'd appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a great time.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back with more AI news soon.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.